Hey guys, PDC here, and we are back after a long hiatus. I had been talking about some other things, mostly Pokemon related. If you know, you know. So I am recording this after I finished up Classic, and this is a round 2 game versus two good friends of mine. We have Ladybug here versus Gilbert Arenas for round 2 of the DPP Invitational, and we are going to go ahead and get started. So I will go ahead and comment this at a decent pace. We have dual lead Cheetar, and we're going to see a dual swap to Skarm and Glisk. So you know what that means. These guys are both running stall. Ladybug has a good option here to get up hazards. Gliscor is slower than Skarm, which means this is probably like a sassy Gliscor. And it U-turns into Mag. For what it's worth, Gliscor that has 0 speed IVs and a sassy nature is really good to trap Gengar and trap Skarm because you underspeed Skarm by 1 point. And for Gengar, if you invest in Max Speed F, you live Shadow Ball pretty comfortably. If it's non-Life Orb, you easily tank it. And if it's Life Orb, I think there's a shot of you avoiding it to a KO. I forget exactly what the percentage chance is, but you can usually tank it pretty well. And you can also stall it out because Orb never really runs Taunt or Wisp. Anyway, we're going to see that strategy be employed here. It's probably a Scarf Tar, and this is probably a Scarf Mag. And Mag will maybe Oko this? Yeah, okay, just shot out the miss. This is why I don't like Magneton, because Scarf Magneton is actually comparatively really quite weak. But we're going to see a Whirlwind out, but that Skarm is functionally almost dead. Of course, though, it always can get a chance to recover, especially because Rock's not up. And we're going to see a Brainloom and double back into Mag. So Heracross is going to come out. Heracross is an interesting Pokemon because of its very unorthodox typing, it can typically wall Pokemon like Brainloom, especially if you're using like a Rest Talk Gut set, which is what I assume Ladybug is doing. So we see a Quagsire come out. Again, this is a very defensive team. It's on. I would guess Ladybug's last are probably something along the lines of like Latias, and a second Steel, so maybe like Jirachee, or Clef. Actually, either Lati Clef or Steel Clef, because Heracross makes a lot of sense, because Heracross is such a good counter to Breloom, and Breloom gets a lot of free mileage on Clef. We're going to see Ladybug sacrifice the Skarm, which I think is a little bit interesting. I think there was a case for keeping it there, depending on what the last 2 Pokemon are. And again, how good of a counter Heracross is to Breloom. And we're just going to see staying in and Leech Seeding. So, not much fear, because the Heracross, as Gilbert Arenas probably realizes, is defensive, and it's very unlikely it's going to be posing a massive threat, especially without the Guts boost, to a Breloom, which is also likely max invested in defense and HP. And that Force Palm doing 10% basically confirms it. In all likelihood, that is an impish Heracross, and that Mega Horn only doing 46 proves it even more. Now, the big thing here is that this Breloom set is very likely, right now it's revealed Leech Seed and Force Palm. This could have Spore as a last move, or it could not. Defensive Breloom is not obligated to run Spore like offensive Breloom is, because you are able to cause switches in the same vein with Leech Seed. And you don't get as much mileage out of Spore because you're not able to force a switch with a threat like Focus Punch as easily, because you're way, way comparatively weaker. Often you would rather have something like Seed Bomb and Protect. Protect is almost usually a given on this set, but Seed Bomb is really good because you can actually threaten out things like Starmie, and you can Seed Bomb Roosting Gliscor that only have Ice Fang. Otherwise, you just kind of get walled too easily. Versus offense, Spore might be more useful, because sleeping something on offense could be huge. But this Breloom really, really is going to be good against offense no matter what, because it is a natural check, hard check, solid check to Gyarados. And Protect enables it to mess around with Pokemon that have either a choice item or not much of a lifespan on them, or Pokemon that will have to rely, like Bronzong and Metagross, to explode to actually take out this Breloom in one hit. So that's, some food for thought there. I would guess it's probably Protect Seed Bomb, but it could be up in the air. With Scarf Tar, you're okay versus Starmie, but versus defensive teams, Starmie kind of walls the hell out of this, because it can just spin away Leech Seed if you Spore something else. So that's just a thought, that depends on the set here. We're just going to see Force Pump, Force Pump, Force Pump with the Leech. This Heracross is 100% walled, and if Gilbert gets Hazards up here, which I imagine on the rest he's going to probably pivot to Gliscor, or that. Okay, so Protect is revealed, which was a given, and now it's either Spore, it's either Spore or Seed Bomb last. I've seen Facade, but Facade isn't really super useful because you don't do much to Lottie. So we see a pivot to Gliscor. Gliscor probably has Rocks. Usually Rocks is thrown on this type of Gliscor set because it's not going to be taunting anything, and it's going to tank that Mega Horn. You know, this is a zero attack Heracross. If Heracross had max attack, that would probably do about 40-ish, but either way, we're just going to see a Rock probably. Yep, Rocks go up, and now that Breloom gets even more threatening because earlier Ladybug could kind of pivot around it without worrying too much about losing health on his team, but now with Rocks up, he's going to be put on a timer, and that's where this set really, really shines. And you'll see how, even though it's not using moves like 150 base power Focus Punch, the sheer ability for Breloom to force switches is what makes it so good with Leech Seed. So we're going to see Heracross and probably just a repeat of this sequence where we have a Leech Seeding Breloom over and over and over and over, forcing switches, and with the Leech Seed, Gilbert is very comfortable to pivot to other Pokemon, which otherwise maybe wouldn't be super comfortable coming in onto a Heracross, especially now a Guts-boosted Heracross. Realistically, Gliscor is going to be the default switch for this, and that Heracross is getting really, really weak. So one of the inhibitors to using the Rest Talk set is that, well, you're asleep, and you don't have instant recovery. And Heracross is not terrible in the hazards, but it's not great in the hazards. So it gets worn down pretty quickly. We see Jirachee finally come out. Breloom between Jirachee is... What's interesting is Quag can be quite dangerous here. If that Jirachee can't touch... Oh, well, okay. Well, never mind. I eat my words. There's the Seed Bomb. So Ladybug assumed it had Spore. And as you can see, I think this Breloom is just going to be able to clean up here. If this does not have Psychic this Starmie, which it probably doesn't, it's probably T-Wave. Psychic Me has kind of dropped off a cliff in terms of usage the past few years. It used to be relatively common because people needed to have some sort of Breloom check, and Breloom coming in for free on Starmie was seen as one of the worst things possible. But this Breloom is just cleaning up the team now. As you can see, Lucario is unable to even remotely touch it with close combat. I mean, 65 is a lot, but it's not nearly as much as it needs to be doing. So this was a very straightforward game, and you see the utility of one of my favorite sets, which is this Protect Leech Breloom. It really is a fantastic enabler on defense because it can force damage, especially versus teams like Ladybugs, which kind of waver in between stall and balance. And, you know, his only counter was Heracross, and with Mag, it took away the Scarm out of the game. And, you know, it just made it really difficult for him to win. You see, Breloom didn't even need Spore here to really clean up. It was pointless because Spore is not actually the main driving offensive factor here for this Breloom. It's Leech and then the residual damage from Sand, Hazards, and Status. So we're going to go ahead and go to the second game, and let me just keep these guys on the same sides. And I'll put this down to slow, and we're going to see a game two. So game two going in, I imagine we're going to probably see some more offensive teams coming out here. We're going to see Starmie from Ladybug and Gyarados from Gilbert Arenas. Probably Specs Me. Specs Me leads very common, and we're going to see a Pump. Yep, that is definitely Specs on the Lottie. Lead Gyara is usually either DD or CB. I mean, it's almost always DD or CB, but I've seen Rest Talk Gyaras in the past. It could also be DD T-Wave, but on a team like this, it's more likely either banned or offensive DD. And we're going to see a T-Tar coming out from Ladybug. Maybe choice ban, maybe not. It's not 100% sure from the suit damage off the top of my head. But it's going to pursue the Lottie, which in all likelihood is a Lum Berry Latias set. As Gilbert Arenas goes to Bronzong and gets the rocks up. And Ladybug pivots to Pert. Now, something interesting here is just looking at the team from Gilbert Arenas, you can... So Zong is probably offensive. Usually when you see Zong on offensive teams, it's either paired with Mag or it could be Trick. I've seen Trick Band, I've seen Trick Iron Ball. This is likely Lumberry with Explosion to attacks. And, you know, Bronzong is really good because when you don't run into a Skarmory, Bronzong is actually a really, you know, impenetrable threat to offensive teams. Because Pert, even though Pert isn't going to get hurt, Bronzong has to essentially trade with it with Explosion. It's a forced trade, and Explosion is something which, on a Pokemon like Swampert, would enable Pokemon like DD Tar and DD Gera and DD Knight and Scizor and whatever. Other Pokemon also like Ironhead Jirachee. So Bronzong really forces teams that have a reliance on ground types like Hippowdon or Swampert or Gliscor to some that kind of counter the offensive steals. It gets Rocks Up and can force them into a relatively comfortable trade where the Zong user comes out of it in a more beneficial position because one of their essential walls is now blown up on. So Ladybug's probably going to try and get Rocks Up here, and we're going to see Bronzong go for the hard Explosion and knock out that perp. Sometimes people forget how strong and a brave Bronzong really is. And that's just going to OHKO. Even if it was offensive perp, that's just incredible power. And we are going to see a Metagross come out and then into a Donphan. Okay, so this is interesting because looking at Ladybug's team, he could have a Scarf Tom in the back. That wouldn't be super unexpected, but otherwise, this is a free spin. And we might actually see the very similar scenario we saw last turn play out, or last couple turns, where we see Bronzong exploding on a ground type to make way for a Pokemon like DD-Tar or Jirachee. So let's see if that plays out here. Okay, swap the Latias. Rotom is less likely. Spin. Now Gera is much more enabled. Donphan plus Gera is a really brutal combo because Donphan and Gyarados, not only are they offensively and type chart compatible, they're also, defensively compatible. And for teams with Pokemon like Donphan, which might appreciate slowing down the pace a little bit, it's kind of a stopgap to most physical attackers that otherwise would really, really punish teams like Gilbert Arena's. So we see a pivot to Metagross based on a damage as either Scarf or Agility with not much investment. We're going to see a Bronzong switch. Tough mash miss. Try saying that 3 times fast. And given the swap out, I would guess this is likely Scarf. Conserving it is reasonable for Specs Lottie, and Ladybug's last is in all likelihood a Scarfer. So we're going to see Waterfall doing 41. Zong is, it's just going to take a trade here. And right now, it's hard to say really who is favored. I think Specs Lottie is going to be doing a lot of damage. It's less likely we're going to see Triple Steal. But Ladybug decides to go hard Lottie, and if that is Scarf meta. I don't think that was the right swap there, because looking at Ladybug's team, so he has a Specs Me at 100, 88 after Rocks. Paired T-Tar, which is likely CB, could be Adamant or Lonely Berry. Specs Lottie, and then in all likelihood a Scarfer last, which could be a Scarf Metagross, or it could be a Scarf Jira, or it could be a Scarf Lucario. Either way, my bet is on a Scarf Steel, because, you don't necessarily need it when you have T-Tar and Zong, because those are solid enough, Dragon checks as it is, but it would help. And that's why I think, it's interesting Ladybug decided to go to Laddie here, because if Laddie got in on Donphan, or what, I'm not sure what his last would be, but I would guess if I were in Ladybug's position, it could be a Jirachee, but I would think something more along the lines of like a T-Tar, or a DD Knight, maybe, something that would not automatically lose to Skarm, because Skarm looks a bit difficult for his team for sure. I probably would have saved the Specs Lottie, because worst case scenario, if it's T-Tar, you surf you to a KO, Fan and Meta can't come in, or, if it's Dragonite, you just depulse. You die anyway, but you can still come in on the Fan regardless, because you live Ice Shard. So I'm not sure why he just hard Lottie there, unless he expected him to go Donphan. Metagross at least was a really kind of neutral pick for him, because he could force the Explosion if it was an unfavorable matchup in the worst case. So we see Starmie come out, we see a Pump. In all likelihood, the last is going to come out here. Kingdra is also an option for what it's worth. And we're going to see D-Knight, so one of the major picks. Probably DD. We're going to see a pivot out to T-Tar here. And T-Tar is likely going to drop to an Earthquake, or an Outrage if he does not have Earthquake, but usually DD Knight nowadays, not usually, but I personally favor Earthquake Fire Punch on my Dragonites nowadays. So we see Jirachee. My bet is it's going to be a Scarf Jirachee, and we see an Aries Punch. Yes, there we go. and D-Knight's going to drop in 1. So now it comes down to, can Donphan win? And I think Ladybug's in, yeah, just go for the Ice Punch here. Try and get a freeze. Earthquake does one-shot. Okay, and also from the damage there, that is, I think he's using my Donphan spread, which is 341 attack. I use that spread to, I think Ice Shard kills on D-Knight after Stealth Rock. And we're going to see a Protect, and assuming this is Ice Shard, this is going to definitely take out the 6% me. And this is, you know, kind of where you wish that you maybe went to Starmie instead, or you turn Jirachee instead of the Specs Lottie, but it's not really even going to matter because that Ice Shard is going to take out that Starmie, and Gilderius is going to beat Ladybug 2-0 for round 2 of DPP Invitational. So some notes on this game. A couple things on the teams. I like Ladybug's build. It's alright. It's very standard. It's something that is derivative of those types of like TR, OTR Zong plus CB-Tar teams. What's interesting is both these teams are builds that actually could maybe use a Magnezone for some extra help. Gilderius' team, I'm a little skeptical in Skarm, because even though you have a spinner, Donphan with Ice Shard is the only move that hits Skarm without a user of Knockoff or another Trapper. Is not going to have, you know, staying power versus it. It will lose eventually. Bronzong is also not going to be beating Skarm unless it's Trick Ball or Choice Band, and I believe on this team it's Lum. The Laddie is Lumberry, so it can't Trick. It can T-Wave the Skarm, but that might not actually really matter much, and in fact that might even be better because that way it can avoid getting Earthquaked on the Roost by Donphan or Bronzong. The main idea here is that it's either going to be Fire Punch, EQ, DD Knight, which is a common set. Typically they run Life Orb when they run 3 attacks, but you can run Lumberry as well. Or he's just going all in on going to try and bait the Skarm with the Gyarados, which I am not sure if it's banned. I don't think it is based on the damage. I think it's just regular Adamant. It might have Taunt, which helps for Skarm, or it might have T-Wave and try and flinch it to death itself. Or just trying to get it in on a trick with Metagross. But I think basically the call here was a team like this is matching up very well into Balancer offense. And Gilderius knows, okay, well, Ladybug brought Stall and Skarm game 1. Based on that, it's unlikely that a person like Ladybug is going to bring Skarm Stall 2 times in a row. And for Ladybug, we see the Zong, you know, kind of slow Paraspam. Well, not necessarily Paraspam, because none of these Pokemon are revealed to have T-Wave, but it's a type of build that is relying on OTR Zong to subvert the speed dynamic that is present on the team, and pairing that with a CB-Tar and an offensive Pert is going to help him on that. And then, of course, he has Specs Lottie, Specs Me for an overwhelming amount of power on the special side. So really here, I guess it's you're trying to overload Skarm, which is a little bit easier with either Trick Lottie, Trick Rachi, CB-Tar, Fizz Pert, and then you're trying to get speed control versus offense, which with dual setup might be a big threat to you with Zong and Jirachee by itself. So interesting teams. I think that these are very good examples of like new styles of offense which are relying on either things like Specs Me or Specs Lottie to overload opposing teams, or utilizing a little more bulky sweepers like D-Knight and Gyarados paired with a spinner like Donphan, which fills the roles of a rocker and kind of a stopgap on offense. So it makes it so that offense is not overly susceptible to Pokemon like Jirachee, which otherwise might really just Iron Head your whole team to death, especially on a team where you're lacking Mag, the Trap It, and you have Dragons. So, I mean, Donphan is a Pokemon that I'm a big fan of, and as the tour goes on, we're going to see how this idea of Donphan offense becomes more and more common, because Donphan is kind of a jack-of-all-tradesman where you can use it as a way to compress rolls into a singular utility where you can choose to have Rocks, you can choose to have Spin, without completely giving up your offensive ability, and also being a really good defensive check to things that offense might struggle versus, like Bronzong, or Metagross, Jirachee, or opposing DD Knight, or Mixgon, or Scarfgon. So it's a really interesting Pokemon, and I will hopefully be commentating some more games in the future that deal with offensive Donphan offense. It's also really strong. It can 2 KO Clefable, which Starmie wishes it could do on a non-recoil, non-choice locked basis. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the commentary. This was a relatively quick one, and I will see you guys on the next one, which in my case will be BKC versus Jirachee. See you guys on the next one.